Okay, so this video is part one of the Excel skills assessment. I'll work through the first worksheet, the new clients worksheet for the Buff and Tough Gym in a single video, and then we'll do the chart exercise, the September data worksheet in a separate video. The opening contextual paragraph that you get with the instructions for the Buff and Tough Gym says that you're a sales representative at the local fitness centre, Buff and Tough Gym. Your manager expects each representative to track weekly membership data. So you create a spreadsheet to store new client data. Membership costs are based on the membership type. Clients can rent a locker for an additional annual fee. You're required to collect a down payment based on the membership type. Determine the balance and then calculate the monthly payment for the new clients based on a standard interest rate. It doesn't tell you that the interest rate is annual in the opening contextual paragraph, and it doesn't tell you in the worksheet, but it is. We can make that assumption because it's 5.75%. It's really high. In addition, you need to calculate general statistics to summarize for your manager. So the summary statistics portion, I'll cover quite fast at the end. It's really the VLOOKUP, the if function, and the payment function that are going to cause people problems as they work through this file. So we need to evaluate the actual worksheet first. What does the data look like? We can tell it's a gym, there's a title in here, but even if we didn't have the title, the fact that there's a locker fee for this organization where you can take out different levels of membership narrows it down to a couple of different business types. There aren't going to be many. Pools, perhaps, sports centers. This is a fitness center or gyms, places where you would rent a locker as part of your membership. It's only going to be a couple of different types of business. So the data does tell us a little bit. We've got new clients. We don't have full names. We've only got last names or surnames. We've got membership types, whether the new client has elected to take out an individual membership, a deluxe membership, or a family membership. And then we have some data in column D where the new client has indicated whether they want a locker at an added cost or not. Some people said yes, some people said no. And then in column F, we've actually got some additional data that tells us how long this new client has actually signed up for, how many years have they taken out their membership for. But we need to populate the cost in column C, the annual total in column E, the total due in column G, the down payment in column H, and the monthly payment in column J. There is already a formula in column I, column G minus column H plus column I. This is currently resulting in a zero balance, but that's not going to change even when we put values in to the two columns that are being used in that formula. It's still going to resolve to a zero balance because if we take a look at the formulas tab, in the formula auditing group on the right hand side of that ribbon, there is an error checking drop down, and in the error checking drop down it tells us that there are circular references. It actually says that the circular reference is in I8, which it is true, there is a circular reference in I8, but it's not the only cell in column I where the circular reference exists. The circular reference is going to exist from I5 all the way through to I13. All of these cells are going to have the same issue. And it tells us it's a circular reference, and the circular reference is one where a formula is attempting to include the cell that it is currently located in. So it's trying to include itself, if you will. And it can never complete because it doesn't know what answer to put in there, because it's always trying to include itself. If it doesn't know what the answer is, it can't include itself in the formula, and you end up with a zero balance and a circular reference error. We can very quickly, I'm going to resolve this now, so that when we do columns G and column H, it'll make sense as to what the balance is. When you have a circular reference, what you need to do is remove the reference in the formula to the cell that the formula is attempting to complete and that the formula is located in. So in this case, we just need to take out any reference to column I. I can have the answer in column I, and then the formula is going to be the total due minus the down payment. Now, it's not going to change my answer right now because I still don't have anything in those two columns. But now, if I go back to formulas, I can see that the circular references have been taken care of. So we can get into the actual meat of the assessment. Step number 1 says that you need to perform some preliminary work. You need to open the starting workbook, which is the one that we've got open, acknowledge the existing circular reference error. We actually acknowledged it and took care of it, and then assign a range name to the membership table. It does say that you'll correct the circular reference error, but I wanted to do that early on and get it out of the way. It's not really related to anything else that we do in this file. So step number 1, part A says save the file. I'm not going to do that. That's for you guys to do. And then on the new clients worksheet, which is where we are, it's the first worksheet of the workbook, assign the name membership to the range A18 to C20. So the range membership is going to refer to these cells, this selection that I've just made, and just the data. Now, we could include the headers. It will still continue to work just fine. But because we're not actually searching using a VLOOKUP, we're not going to match the headers up. We're just going to tell it what columns to search for the data. We don't need to include the actual heading rows. So A18 through C20, and then in the name box up here in the top left-hand corner, I'm going to call it membership. Now, every time, if I put my cursor over here, every time membership is called in the name box, the cursor is going to jump to and select that range of cells. So if my cursor's over here, I'm going to leave it there on the right-hand side. And then in the name box, if I select membership, it selects that range of cells for me. Now, because of the way that this works, by default, these are treated as an absolute selection, fixed in place in columns and in rows, which is going to be useful to us because then we don't need to make it absolute. We don't need to worry about whether we're going to end up with blank rows selected, and we don't need to worry about the membership table selecting, moving along with the formula, which is what would happen if we didn't make it absolute or we didn't give it a named range. And then the next step says insert a function to display the current date. It does tell you that it wants the current date in cell B2. It also tells you that it wants a function. It doesn't say type the current date into cell B2. Now, I'd probably have marked it correct if you had just typed it in there. But the best way to put the current date in, so that it will always be the current date, is going to be the today function. And we just need to open and close parentheses. There are no arguments to go with this function. This function takes no arguments. And so you just round that formula out. Equals today, open, close parentheses, and then it'll pull today's date. But it pulls it from your system clock on your computer. So depending on what the format is, depending on what time it is, we'll determine how it displays up here. But this is going to work for now. When I save and close this file and I open again in a week's time, the next time I open it, it's going to put the current date in. So it won't be today's date. It's actually going to be a date in a week's time. So that can be quite useful for us. Step number 2 says we need to calculate cost, annual total, and total due. So we're gonna work with 3 columns in step 2. It says you're ready to calculate the annual basic membership cost and the total annual cost. The basic annual membership is determined based on each client's membership type using the lookup table. So it says insert a function, and then it gives you the function name. It tells you that it's a VLOOKUP in cell C5, which is going to be the first blank row in the cost column, in column C, to display the basic annual membership cost for the first client. Now, if we were doing this in our heads, if we were doing this on paper, you could work this out quite quickly. We can definitely get an idea as to how much it's going to cost them by saying, okay, Mr. Andrews, Mrs. Andrews, Miss Andrews, whoever this is, this client Andrews, elected to take a deluxe membership. Now, if I look at the membership table, deluxe membership is the first one that's listed, and if I go across to the cost, it's $575. So we know what the answer should be. It's how do we populate column C with a function that will answer all of those questions, all 9 of those questions. What's the associated cost for each of these membership types that the clients have chosen? And to do that, we're going to use a VLOOKUP. There's a couple of different functions that we could have used, but VLOOKUP is by far the most straightforward in this particular example. If we've got 2 tables, and the second table is where we're going to be pulling our answer from, then we're probably going to end up using a VLOOKUP to answer questions like this. And so in order to identify the annual cost for the first client and their membership type, we have to tell the VLOOKUP function to look at the type of membership that the client has chosen. So in this case, it's going to be a reference to B5 that tells the function, okay, so they chose a deluxe membership. Now, Excel still doesn't know what that is, but it can match that lookup value and find it. It can search for deluxe in the membership table. So if I type membership into the table array, I can either type it, if I delete that out, I can either type it or I can select that range of cells. And if I select this range of cells, it picks it up as the membership table. And I don't need to do anything else with it. This is quite useful for us. Now, the table that I've selected, the membership table, is actually 3 columns wide. We've got the memberships in the first column. We've got the associated costs for those memberships in the second column, and then we've got the down payment amount for each of those memberships in the third column. Now, I want just the cost at the moment. I have another column in column H for the down payment, so that's going to be another VLOOKUP with an almost identical formula, and that's going to return the down payment from the third column in the membership table. I want the cost right now, and that's in the second column of the membership table. And so in my column index number argument within the VLOOKUP, I'm going to tell it to return the value from column number 2. I don't need to use the range lookup argument in the VLOOKUP function. The first 3 are emboldened, they're in bold, and those are the only ones that have to be used. We would use range lookup to tell the function, I want you to make an exact match when it looks for the lookup value in the membership table. But we don't have any other words similar to deluxe in either in the membership column or in the membership table. The membership names are quite distinct: deluxe, family, individual. There's no risk that Excel's going to confuse these, so I don't need to use the range lookup in this particular example. I can click OK. If I can click OK, what are you doing? There we go. And then I can copy that down. Take out the total row. It wouldn't have put anything in this row at all if the word totals wasn't here. So every time I copy these down, because the word totals is in A14, it's going to attempt to complete the formula in those cells too. For the VLOOKUPs, it's not going to work because in B14 there is no individual membership. Sorry, there is no membership type selected because it's not a new client row. And so what we'll do, anything that we get in row 14, before we want to put totals in at the end, we're going to delete it out. So the next step says use the if function. Step B, part 2, is the if function to calculate the annual total amount, which is the sum of the basic cost from column C for their membership for 1 year, and the locker fee, which is $75, it's in B22, for those clients that indicated that they want to rent a locker. So Andrews and Baker said yes, Carter and Dudley said no, Evans said yes, then 3 people in a row said no, and then Ivans at the bottom said yes. And so we've got 2 possible outcomes for the annual total. It's either going to be the membership cost plus the $75 if they indicated that yes, I do want a locker, or it's going to be the annual cost on its own because they indicated no, I don't want a locker. So we've got 2 possible outcomes, and we're going to use the if function to populate this column. And so what we'll do is we're going to tell the logical test, take a look at what the first client put in D5. Did they say, yes, I want a locker, or did they say, no, I don't want a locker? We can only test it once. We can only do a one logical test. So I can't test it twice, and there's no need to test it twice, because if they didn't say yes, they have to have said no. There's only 2 possible outcomes. So I test the first possibility. I say, look at D5, and does D5 equal, and then what I do is I put in quotations, yes. I put it in quotations like this, not plus D5. So it would read D5 equals, and then in quotations, D5. No, it doesn't. Let's do this again. We click on D5 here, and we say, does D5 equal, and then in quotations, we put the word yes. Does D5 equal yes? I clicked on it because I saw yes. And it says it's true. So D5 for the first client says yes, they do want a locker. Now, if it's true, in the value of true argument underneath, we can say, okay, so take their annual membership cost. In Andrew's case, it's going to be $575, and we're going to add that $75 that's in B22. So it's going to be C5 plus, and we can either type 75 in here, or we can select B22. But if we select B22, we need to then highlight it in our function and hit F4 to turn it into an absolute reference, so that C5 can move and become 300 and 1500 as it kind of goes down the clients in these rows. It can move, it's free to move, and that's fine, as is D5. D5 is free to go yes, yes, no, no, yes, and so on. But every time that the answer is yes, I want it to pull that $75 from B22. And so when we copy the formula down in the column, I don't want the reference to B22 to move as well. It would become, from 75, it would become 5.75%, then it would become 12, then it would be blank. There's no other data down there. And so I have to force it to look at that exact cell each time. To do that, I've got to make it absolute. Now, the reason I don't type 75 in here is because if the amount that it costs to take a locker out at the gym changes in the next couple of months or in the next year, I would have to come in, and if I type 75, I would have to go into column E and start adjusting the actual formulas themselves, which it's got the potential to lead to mistakes, and so I'd rather not do that. Instead, what I would prefer, rather than adjusting formulas, I'd rather reopen the worksheet and go to B22 and update the amount there. And then it doesn't matter like how much it is. The answer will always be right in column E. It'll just update to the new amount if the price increases or decreases for the locker fee. And for the membership cost, that's why we refer to the table. We've got cells that contain these values. If they change and they're increased or they're decreased, we don't have to adjust the actual formulas themselves because we're just using cell references. We just update the amounts in the table the one time, leave the formulas alone, and the formulas will correct themselves. So we know that Andrews, the first client, is paying $575 for their membership for the year, and they elected to take a locker, which is $75. So immediately we can tell that the function is working. It's currently $650, which is $575 plus 75. So it's got the answer right for the first person, but and it would get the answer right for the second person too, even if we didn't fill in the value of false box. Their membership, the answer would just be 375 for them. It would be 300 for their individual membership, and then they indicated, yes, I want a locker, and then it would add that $75. But as soon as it gets down to the Carter family, in row number 7, it'll stop working because the logical test will fail. It'll say, actually, no, this doesn't say yes, and there's nothing in the value of false argument. So in order to take care of everyone, all the people that said yes and all the people that said no, we need to populate the value of false argument too. And what we said was, if they don't want the locker fee, then their annual total is actually just their membership cost. There are no additional costs in there. So the value of false is going to be, if we're doing the first client, only the $575. Now, the first client did indicate that they want a locker. That's true. And so their amount is not going to be $575. And so you might think, okay, well, why would we continue to do it against this first row if we already know that we've taken care of their answer? And the reason is that they could change their mind later on. They might come back and say, do you know what? I don't need a locker. It's overkill. And then you would have to change it in your worksheet and the formula will change. But if this becomes no, if that reference to yes in D5 changes to a no, if they change their mind for some reason, then we want the formula to update to include it. So what we do is we just tell it whatever's in C5 is going to be the total if they say no. I don't want a locker. So they're paying one of two amounts. If they want a locker, they pay $650. If they don't want a locker, they pay $575. So it currently resolves to $650 for the first client, and then I'll drag this through instead of double clicking it so that we don't have to delete the total row out. The second client that we said it should be $375 is also correct in the formula. But the Carter family, who doesn't want a locker, if they did, it would cost them $1,575. But they said no, and so it just cost them $1,500. So we can see that the function is working. So that's fairly straightforward. The total due is a little bit simpler. Step C says, calculate the total amount due for the first client based on the annual total and the number of years in the contract. And so we now have our annual total data for these clients, and they either selected to take the membership out over 1, 2, or 3 years. And they made that decision up front. Now, that's not to say that Andrews can't have a 3-year membership. So he's going to do his first year. His annual total is going to be $650. He can come back in year 2 and take out another membership or extend it. But right now, we only have him down as being a customer for the 1 year. Baker is taking his membership out over 2 years. The Carter family, they're going to take their membership out over 3 years, and so on. So the total due is just a multiplication. It's going to be the annual total. So in this case, it's going to be E5. And it's going to multiply by whatever value that they they chose in column F. So in this case, it's going to be multiplied by 1, so it's just going to be 650. But then we're going to end up with some bigger amounts in here for the total due for the people that have taken out memberships over multiple years. So if I put the first one in, that's going to be $650. And then if we copy it down, if we look at the Carter family in row 7, their total due is going to be $4,500, which is 3 times the $1,500 that it's going to cost them for their annual membership. So that makes sense. So that's the total due column. The down payment is, where are we? The down payment is step number 3 in part 1. It says determine the down payment and the balance. You need to collect a down payment based on the type of membership for each new client, and then you must determine how much each client owes. So step A says insert the function VLOOKUP. Once again, it tells us what function it's going to be. We should know though, you look that we've got membership cost and down payment all matched in this second table, in the membership table. You should have a pretty good idea of the function that you're going to use before you even go into it. This function is going to work almost exactly the same as the VLOOKUP that we put in column C. We need to say, okay, for the first client, take a look at their membership cost and find that membership cost in the membership table, just like we did before. But instead of returning the cost from column number 2, we want to return the down payment from column number 3. So column index number 3 will return the appropriate down payment for the type of membership that they selected. So deluxe membership is $575 annually for the cost, but the down payment's only $250. So that's what we get as our answer when we tell it, look at the membership table and return the value from the third column of my selection. It's going to be $250, which is great. Copy that down. Those are our down payments. You can see the Carter family, they're taking out the family membership for $1,500. Their down payment is $700. It's the highest in column H, but it is correct. When we go and look at the family membership, the associated cost is $1,500 and the down payment is indeed $700. So far we're on the right track. We know that all this is correct. I resolved the circular reference error at the very beginning in column I, and that formula is now able to work now that we've actually populated columns G and column H with some monetary amounts. The formula has something to do, so it's no longer resolving at a zero balance. Instead, now it's showing us the real outstanding amounts, the amounts that are owed over the term of the membership, whether it's 1, 2, or 3 years, how much they have to repay, how much they have to pay the gym, how much they still have left to pay. So some big amounts in there, but if you've got 3 years to make that payment, maybe it won't be that bad. So what we're going to do is we're going to move on to step 4 in part 1, which is to calculate the monthly payment in column J. It says that the clients pay the remainder by making monthly payments. Okay, so far it makes sense. Monthly payments are based on the number of years specified in the client contract. That's what we've got in column F, and the standard interest rate. Now the standard interest rate is down here. It's in B23. It doesn't tell us that this is an annual interest rate, 5.75%, but it can't be a monthly interest rate because it's really high. Or I mean, it could be a monthly interest rate, but that's a lot of interest to pay on a monthly basis against an outstanding balance that's quite large. Some of these numbers are quite large, and so it can't be realistically an annual interest. So we're going to convert it. We're going to convert it into a monthly interest rate. So what we're going to do, we're going to use the payment function equals PMT, and there are a number of arguments that it wants us to fill in here. Stupid thing. The first one is the rate. Okay, so we're going to take our interest rate, which is in B23, and I'm going to tell it the reference to B23 is absolute, because when I copy my formula down in column J, I don't want B23 to become B24 to become B25 and so on. So I make it absolute so it doesn't move anywhere, and I'm going to divide it by 12. Now technically, there is a reference to 12 months in a year in B24, which they've put in here so that you can use it. But it's never going to change. Like, the interest rate might change, the locker fee might change, the cost of the memberships and the down payments might change, but the number of months per year is not going to change from 12. It will always be 12. There's never going to be 14 months in a year. And so I don't need to use a cell reference for that. I'm just going to put the 12 in and divide it, because I know that I want monthly payments. They're going to pay 12 times a year, because there are 12 months in a year. And I'm just going to say divided by 12. The second argument, the NPER, I don't like the name of this function, but what it means is how many payments are they going to make over the term of the loan, in this case over the term of their membership. How many payments are they going to make? Now, they're making monthly payments, and we don't have the number of months. We don't currently have the number of months that each client is taking out their membership over. What we do have in column F are the number of years that they're going to take their membership out over. So what we can do for the NPER is actually say, well, okay, well, whatever value is in that row for that client in column F. So for Andrews, it's 1 year. For Baker, it's 2 years. Take that value and multiply it by 12. Because if it's 1 year, that's going to give me 12 months. If it's 2 years, that's going to give me 24 months. If it's 3 years, that's going to give me 36 months. And that's how many payments they're going to make to the gym. So I convert both of these, the rate and the total number of payments for the loan. If I've got the data in years, I have to convert it into months. For the first one, I have to divide it by 12 to get a monthly interest rate. And for the second one, for the NPER, I have to multiply it by 12 to get the total number of months for the membership. Now, the PV is the present value. Present value just basically means outstanding balance. And it says it's the present value that the total amount that a series of future payments is worth now. So it's talking about how much they owe, how much they're going to pay back in total to the gym, or at least how much do they owe to the gym, because they're going to pay back that amount plus interest. And what we want is this a reference to column I, to the balance, because that's what's still owed on the day that they go take this membership out. They fill the form in, but they only pay the down payment amount. So Andrew's only currently paid $250. His total that he owes for that 12 months is $650. So if he only paid $250 on the day that he took the membership out with the gym, then he still owes $400. So I'm going to make a reference to that amount in column I in this present value argument in the PMT function. But in order to ensure that the monthly payment amount for the gym in column J is a positive value, I have to treat the balance as a negative because it's owed to the gym. It's owed by the client. So it should be negative 400 for Andrews instead of 400. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say in the PV argument of the PMT function, I'm going to say it's actually negative I5, whatever value is in I5. And that's going to convert it to a positive number for us. If it was in brackets or if it was red, then we would be able to tell that it was displaying as a negative value. That's not the case here. We've converted it to a positive number. which means that those are all correct. So that's the bulk of this work done. The next step is, let's have a look, finalizing the workbook. So it says calculate the totals on row 14, which is fine. By far the easiest way. Is this going to let me with multiple selections? No, it's not. I'm going to have to do these one at a time, aren't I? So if I select everything that's in a column plus a blank row at the very end where I want the totals to go, in the Home tab, I can just use the auto sum just to populate those totals for me. It won't allow you to do, I don't think, or at least it didn't used to. If I select this one, including a blank row from column G, and I select this one from J, I'm going to skip the down payment and the balance for a second, and try to auto sum. No, it did work. Okay, I could have done them all at once. I thought for a second that that it would tell you that you can't use the auto sum feature with multiple selections, but it turns out that you can. So calculate the totals in row 14 and then insert appropriate functions, count, min, average, max, median, down here in summary statistics. There are a number of steps for finalizing the workbook. Most of them are formatting, so most of them I'm not going to do. But what you will find is that often in Excel, the first and last rows, like this, the first row and then the total row, will be set to accounting or currency, but let's use accounting. And then everything else, these are called internal monetary amounts. Everything between the first and the last row, all of this stuff here, would normally be set to comma style, like so. Which is currency, it just doesn't have the dollar symbol. Now the idea being that we establish in the first row of the data that this is money. And then we've got a total row that's also formatted as money. Everything between them, because they're in the same columns, has to be the same denomination. Like it all has to be money. But we don't need those dollar symbols cluttering up and making the data in these columns really busy. We can establish it in the first and last row and leave it at that. The other thing that we typically do in the last row, where we have a total row, is top and double bottom borders. So you could use, well, so it's not, we would do like a top underline and then we would do like a double underline. There's a couple of different ways that you can do it. This is by far the easiest, top and double bottom borders. The alternative would be to come into the format cells dialog box by expanding the font dialog box and selecting, see there's no underline, there's single underline, there's double underline, which you would think is enough, but there's also single accounting and single and double accounting underline. So if I select double accounting underline, that's going to underline those. And if I go and select the data that was in the previous row, if I was to do the same thing but use the single accounting underline, then technically I get the same thing that you would have with top and double bottom borders. The difference being that it still breaks between the underlines in the cells, whereas the top and double bottom borders applies to the actual cell itself. And so they would all be connected. Technically, this is the correct way to do it, but there's a number of different ways that you can finish that data off. You should always have some sort of top underline and then a double bottom underline, and the reasoning should be quite obvious. We read the data from the left to the right, and we read from the top of the page towards the bottom of the page. And so what this tells us is that these are all monetary values, and then I hit this first underline, and then something different comes afterwards. So we hit the first underline. That tells us this is the end of the individual amounts in this column. That's the end of the actual data points themselves. And then the thing that comes next in the totals row is different. So that's what the first underline tells us. The second underline tells us this is the end of the data in this table. That's why it's double underlined. It lets us know that everything else that's below this isn't direct. I mean, it is connected, but it's not directly related. They're not the same values, even though they're in the same columns. So all this stuff in column C, we've got two different things. We've got our data at the top for the costs for the gym. Those are our actual data points. But then our membership table is located partly in that column. And those amounts don't relate to the clients in the first table. And so the total row, where we double underline it, tells the person that's using this file that's the end of the data, and that these are two distinct tables. Even though information might be in the same columns, they're not part of the stuff that's down here is not part of table 1. So it allows us to see that, which is quite nice. This is how you should format most of your total rows. All right, and then there's like wrap texting headings and stuff like that, fairly low level formatting that I'm not going to do. It's up here if you do want to do it. What else we got? And then it's like left and right margins, insert a footer, all that kind of stuff. The stuff that I'm not going to do. The only thing left in this worksheet really is these summary statistics, and to populate the number of new members. I mean, technically all of these are new members, so it just wants us to count them. But there's a couple of different ways that we can do this. We can use the regular, if I could spell it, we could use the regular count function. But the count function, let's go into here. Does it tell us different types of data, but only numbers are counted? So in the function, the dialog box itself, it does tell us while it can refer, you can select a column that contains multiple types of data. Only cells that contain numbers are going to be counted. Now, that's okay. We don't mind that because a lot of our data is numbers, and I just want a straight count. I don't want to skip anything, and there are no blank rows. So I could just say, okay, count the number of membership costs, the number of annual membership costs. And I need to be careful not to select the total row. But I could say count those, that's going to give me 9. Sure enough, there are 9 clients. Or I could use the count A function. The count A function differs in that it will count numbers the same way the count function will work. But it'll also count text values, and it'll also count things like special characters. It'll count anything. It'll count any cells that contain any data type, as long as the cells are not blank. It's even better. It's even more flexible. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use it against the client names, and make sure I don't select that total row. And again, it's going to tell me that there are 9 new clients, which is correct. So either of those functions will work. But technically, you can use the count A function against any column. You can only use the count function against columns that contain numerical values, or at least that's how you're only going to get the right answer. Lowest monthly payment. The rest of these are based on the monthly payment column in column J. Lowest monthly payment, average monthly payment, maximum monthly payment, and the median monthly payment. So lowest, obviously we're going to go with the min function. I'm going to make sure not to select this total row. So the lowest monthly payment, $12.89. Yeah, that's right. Average monthly payment, we're going to use the average function. If I can spell it, that's the average function. Maximum is the max function. This is why I didn't do it in class. It's so easy. And the median monthly payment is the middle. No, it's not. Yes, it is. It's the middle. It's the middle payment. If we arrange them from smallest to largest in order, whichever one is in the middle, when they're arranged, is going to be the monthly payment. So because we're working on this monthly payment data, I'll just very quickly demonstrate this like I did in class. If I copy those values and paste them down here just as values, and then if I go to the data tab and I sort them from lowest at $12.89 to the highest at $115.17, then what we can do, if this is the lowest payment, if that's client number 1 and this is client number 9, they're not, we're not matching them up, but this is the first client, this is the last client, and there are 9 clients in total. That means that there are 4 clients before and 4 clients after the middle payment. Now the middle payment is going to be $29.55, which is what the median returned for us. So this is the step that the median function takes. It assigns, it takes the data, it lays it out from lowest to highest in order. So smallest, and then next biggest, and next biggest, and next biggest, and so on. And then it identifies what comes in the middle of that data set. If you've got an odd number like this, you'll have an actual middle. You'll have an even number before and an even number afterwards. If you had an even number, let's say that we had 10, I won't put it in, but you might end up between 5 and 6. If we had 10 entries, there would be 4 before and 4 after, and then these would be the middle 2, and then it would average the values for those 2, and then that would be your median. But we're fortunate in this case that it returns an actual value from our data set. It's Ivan's. This is the median payment in this range of payments. All right, and that's it. And that's it for this video.